Hello, welcome back to the Shadower. I'm going to be meeting with a lawyer today. There's nothing wrong. I'm just going to be seeing what she does for a job. So,
Hey, Andrew, sorry.
hey, how's it
Got on the phone call and that was it. You didn't have trouble finding it?
No, it's not too
Good.
bad.
Welcome to my home.
Yeah, so are you like related to the owner of the company or something?
Yeah, so Lance is the last name of my business partner and Andrew is my last name.
Oh,
So it's
okay.
just the two of us, yeah.
Hmm.
Well, come on in. Let's talk for a minute.
Nice to meet you.
We could do it here or we could go in a conference room. What would you like?
Yeah,
What's
this
sort of
room.
a mess?
Man, it seems like you got a pretty big office all to yourself.
Yeah, it's pretty comfortable.
Hmm.
We started our firm almost 3 years ago, and we found this. There's 2 lawyers and 2 full-time paralegals and 2 part-time receptionists, and we found this little slice of this building that was available.
Hmm.
It was just the right size, so.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
So how many types of lawyers are there? Like, what do all the different types, is it a different person that would be like a defense person or someone who would deal with lawsuits, or do you kind of just have to learn everything when you're becoming one?
Well, law school is general, you cover a lot of topics.
Hmm.
And I think this is true, most legal specialties don't have any sort of, special credentialing or,
Hmm.
like you can't major in personal injury law or something in law school. I know some law schools have special programs for like maritime law or something, but
Mhm.
generally speaking, people graduate and they don't have any specialty.
That's interesting.
But in terms of how many types of lawyers, goodness, I mean, most lawyers will have either like a specialty that they fall into, or there's a lot of folks who have a kind of what we call a general practice, and so you might do some family law and some criminal defense and some personal injury,
Mhm.
maybe wills and estates and stuff. But I mean, like our shop just focuses on plaintiff side personal injury litigation.
Okay.
And the folks who are on the other side of our cases generally just focus on civil personal injury defense.
Hmm.
So.
Well, that sounds interesting. So, what kind of qualifications, like how much did you have to go through to, become an attorney?
Well, you do college, and then you have 3 years of law school,
Hmm.
and you have to pass the bar exam. And after that, it's just sort of experience, what you do to train yourself. In fact, I'm advocating right now for, lawyers in my area, personal injury, plaintiff side personal injury lawyers, to be more proactive about educating themselves and not reinventing the wheel, reading good books and attending seminars and finding mentors so that, you can take advantage of the knowledge that other people have, so that, the first time you encounter a certain type of case, you're not having to reinvent the wheel and figure
Yeah.
things out on your own.
So how do you start to get experience right out of college?
Right out of law school,
Or yeah.
most people get it like on the job,
Hmm.
Some people, I had a lot of classmates who graduated in 2009, and there weren't a lot of law firms hiring
Mhm.
at that time because the economy was bad, and so a lot of my classmates, we call it hanging a shingle. They started their own practice and just kind of learned as cases came in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how does it work with actually getting a job? So can lawyers like be on their own, or like how does it help to be with a firm or that kind of thing?
They can be on their own. If you have a law license, you're technically authorized to practice most types of law. I mean, I'll tell you, if I had come right out of law school and decided, I'm going to be a bankruptcy lawyer, I really wouldn't have had, much knowledge to do that. So maybe I could have done it, but I would have had to rely heavily on mentors and, seeking out people to help me do things. Most folks learn on the job. They get a job somewhere, and sometimes it's not the ideal job, but I think everywhere you go, you can learn something.
Hmm.
For me, I learned, from my old firm did the same type of law that I practice now, and that's all they did, and so I learned mostly on the job.
Right. So what would you recommend for somebody like right out of law school, is like how to get into the business and how to find a job and how to get experience and that kind of thing?
Gosh, I would say no matter if you have a job or not, to seek out mentors. And if you're not sure what you want to do, I would suggest people seek out mentors in a lot of different areas of law and take people to lunch or ask if you can come visit their office for 20 minutes and talk with them. And my experience has been most attorneys are really happy to talk with folks and share their thoughts and ideas and mentor and guide.
Yeah.
So that would be I think my number one recommendation for anybody. And you start building your network of people, and if a job comes up, you might come to somebody's mind.
Right.
In our shop, we're lucky we don't have to do a lot of advertising. You know, we don't go on TV or on billboards or anything. Most of our cases just come from other lawyers and judges and friends, so it's just a network-based type practice. We have a website that we don't maintain very well, but for the most part, it's people that we know who know us and know the work that we do and know that we do a good job. If they have a friend who's in a car wreck, or they have somebody who had, lost a loved one in some sort of accident or something, they'll call us up and say, "Can you help us?" Yeah.
Right, so you just have a big enough network, like personally?
Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. So
Yeah.
what would you say you spend like most of your days doing?
Well, that's a good question. It depends on the week, really. I spend a lot of time here just, responding to emails or drafting briefs or whatever. We go to court sometimes. We don't go to trial very often, but we're in trial, meeting with the jury and everything. We do that a few times a year. And a lot of the time we're out meeting with our clients or visiting accident sites or inspecting machines that exploded or whatever, and that part I really like.
So you actually like get to look at all of the evidence and everything that happened as far as the case is concerned?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago, I had to spend 3 days in Denver with a shotgun we had this shotgun that had exploded, and I had to carry it with me. We had to figure out how to get the shotgun to Denver because I couldn't carry it on the plane. So I had to ship it someplace and then pick it up there, and then they cut it up into pieces, and I worked with experts for 3 days, and this was a bunch of engineers, and they had a scanning electron microscope, and they looked at different pieces of the metal parts and looked at the ammo, and it was very cool. So I like doing things like that where I get to go hands-on with evidence and have an expert who knows the technical side of things explaining to me, this is what this means and this is what you're saying, and I really like that part.
So you get to be in the investigation somewhat as well?
Yeah, mostly as sort of an observer and educating myself, so that when I have to go in front of a jury, I can say, the scanning electron microscope does this, and this is what we see, and this is what's on this picture, and stuff like that. Yeah.
So what's usually the full-on process for a single case? How does it start, and how do you get to the end of it?
Well, it depends on the case. Most of them, there's some horrible thing that happened, and that's the downside to what we do, is we meet people when they're dealing with usually the worst part of their life, right?
Yeah.
And we meet with them, and we usually go to their home, we meet their family, and we just sort of let them talk. I like to let people just tell me their story. A lot of it isn't necessary for me in terms of representing them, but it's important to me that they feel like,
just comfortable with you.
They feel comfortable, yeah, and they feel like they're being heard and that I'm really understanding the whole picture. And then from there we start gathering evidence, and sometimes if it's let's say there was a 18-wheeler that crashed into somebody's minivan or something. I was just talking with somebody on the phone about that. We need to know who the trucking company is. We need to find out what insurance they have available. We need to find what are the facts, what's the evidence, the physical evidence that we need to gather. Did the police do an accident reconstruction? If they didn't, do we need to? Do I need to hire an engineer to go out and do a reconstruction? Are there photographs? Do we need to do an animation showing how the crash occurred? How bad are the injuries? Are they getting adequate treatment? Who are their doctors? Do we need to have some sort of, sometimes at trial we've used models of, this is a shoulder joint model, sometimes we use that. Do we need to have a professional illustrator show us what the injury is? And so we gather all of that evidence, and sometimes we file a lawsuit and sometimes we don't have to. Sometimes we just open a correspondence with the insurance company and say, you guys need to pay some money, and they say, yeah, we know. If we do have to file a lawsuit, then that comes with deadlines, and things can take up to 2 or 3 years, depending on how complex the case is.
Jeez.
And if it goes through to the end, we go in front of a judge and a jury and present our evidence and make our arguments, and hope that they'll come to justice for our clients.
Yeah, your whole job is just solving people's problems.
In a way, yeah. I feel my job is to tell people stories and to help them obtain justice. And, you know, all we've got is money. You know, if I had a button on my desk that would say, bring back Michael Palmer, who died as a result of medical negligence 5 years ago, I would push that in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or undo that auto crash, or make that plane not crash, but we don't have that.
Yeah, you just have to use money to try and fix the aftermath.
Yeah. And what we find is that juries come around to that. You know, they understand that there's some things we can't undo, but there are things that we can do to make it right, and so that's encouraging.
Mm-hmm. So something I've always wondered when it comes to lawyers is, like, you know, people say, like, oh, I have a ton of money, I can hire the best lawyers. Like, what makes a lawyer really good, and how can, like, they accomplish more than someone who's, like, not as good? Like, if the law is the law and somebody breaks the law, then how can some people get around that better than others?
That's a really good question. And there's a few questions in that. So I think the question of what makes a good lawyer, well, I'd say number one, integrity. You know, somebody who's got integrity and somebody who is willing to put in the work, you know, to really do their best. I mean, a brand new lawyer out of law school could be awesome if they're just completely honest and if they do what they got to do, you know. Let's say a brand new lawyer out of law school has an injury case like what I handle all the time. I've got a lot more years than them, but they could be great. And if they call me up and say, hey, do you have ideas, or if they'd, you know, do what they need to do to make sure they're collecting the evidence, they could be great. And so, in my experience, lawyers of all different experience levels and all different backgrounds can be awesome if they're honest and they do really hard work. And, you know, occasionally we encounter lawyers who aren't as honest or who are a little bit lazy, and it does their clients a disservice. I think that's the exception, you know, more than the rule. But it's sort of like doctors. I mean, not every doctor is going to be created equal. And before I go see say a heart surgeon, I'd like to do a little research and, you know, talk to some people and learn a few things. And lawyers are just the same.
Right.
So if people come to me often and say, I need a family lawyer, and I don't do that, but they say, who do you recommend, Jessica? And I'm glad that they ask, because I would want to know who someone in the know might recommend. Right.
Right. Yeah, how is it that sometimes there are certain lawyers who can just seemingly evade the law if they're trying to get somebody out of some conviction? Like, how does that kind of thing work?
Well, I mean, I'll say this. The law is not... we can't go up to, like, the state legislature and pull out a book and dust it off and open it up and say, what do you do when, you know... I mean, I'll pick any of my cases. What do you do when, you know, a doctor who gets a call and the patient came in through the emergency room and he's asked to show up and evaluate the patient, and he gets busy and he doesn't show up and the patient dies? You know, what's the law for that? Like, the law can't be that specific, you know?
Yeah, there's way too many case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and even with criminal things, you know, like you say somebody, let's say somebody, I don't know, stole a car. Let's say that's the allegation. And you can go, you know, the law says you can't steal cars, but even in that situation, there's a host of different factors, you know. Maybe it was his car, or maybe he thought it was his car, or maybe it was his girlfriend's car and she authorized him to take it, and he took it and she didn't know it was him, and so she reported. I mean, there's lots of different factors that go into that. And even in cases where, you know, he clearly stole the car, it clearly wasn't his, there are still ways in which he's got to be protected, you know, because on the other side of that, there may be a prosecutor who wants to say, I'm going to charge you with auto theft and murder and all this other stuff. I mean, somebody's got to protect that guy from the state, you know.
Right.
And so to every single case, nothing is black and white. And in fact, I had a friend tell me just the other day, I like talking with lawyers because they appreciate the gray area in life. When sometimes maybe we have, based on our political beliefs or our religious beliefs or our upbringing or our past experiences, we think things in this area are absolutely black and white. Well, I think one thing legal training does to you, and I think experience in just dealing with people's problems in this way does, is helps you see there's very few things in life that are really black and white. And so sometimes that needs to be fought for.
Right.
Yeah.
But I guess that goes back to what you were saying about how, I mean, I guess there's a lot of stigma that, blood-sucking lawyers, like there's a lot of just nasty ones out there. So you would say that the dishonest ones would be the ones who like, really try and, swing the truth a little bit to try and get their case to go the way they want it?
I think so, and again, I would honestly say, in my experience, that a dishonest lawyer is the exception, at least in Utah. But they are out there, we deal with them sometimes. There's some on our side, in my experience, there's some on the other side, And my feeling is, and this is conjecture, but my feeling is a lot of it comes down to what people have been exposed to and what they will tolerate. I mean, for example, there are a couple of law firms in town that, have a lot of lawyers, and they have a culture of kind of walking the line, not necessarily committing to integrity all the time. And they bring on a brand new lawyer, and that new lawyer has seen nothing else. They don't know what else is out there. And so all they know is this culture of, well, sometimes we tell the truth and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we give all the evidence over and sometimes we don't. And so that, to them, that's normal. To a brand new lawyer, that's normal. And then they grow up in that culture, and that's how they practice law. And so, in my experience, it's that kind of situation where you see folks who, you can't really trust, and it's unfortunate. I don't think it's because they're horrible, bad people. I think it's because they've been raised in an environment that tolerates, less integrity than I think most of us will embrace. And so I'll tell you, it will surprise a lot of folks who don't know many lawyers. Say, really, most of them are good, and I think they are. That doesn't mean they make all the right choices. That doesn't mean they don't make mistakes. But I think most lawyers are really trying. Like doctors. I think most doctors are trying to do what's right.
Right. So, would you say that most, I guess, in the way you get paid, do you get paid like a salary, or are you paid by the case, or how does that work for somebody who's like just working it as a job?
Well, it depends on the type of practice. Most lawyers have an hourly rate that they charge the client. And if they work for a law firm, most of the time they are paid a salary by the law firm. The law firm takes in all of the legal fees from their work and then pays them a salary, and maybe throughout the year or at the end of the year they get a bonus in addition to that. Our kind of work is a little bit different because most of our clients are not folks who have, they're not companies, they're not insurance companies or whatever, they don't have a money tree. Right. And so we work strictly on a contingent basis, which means I never get paid by the hour, and I keep track of my time. We take each case and we take a percentage of whatever we collect, and if we collect nothing, we don't get paid. That's how almost all personal injury lawyers work in the country, and it works really well because that way our clients don't have to come up with $30,000, $50,000, $100,000 to pay attorney's fees, and I take all the financial risk. The other reason I like that is that my client's financial interest and my financial interest are pointing the same direction.
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
Even if I'm motivated by nothing but money, I'm still going to do a really good job for my client, because the more that I get for them, the more I get paid. So I like that unity of financial interest. But here, so I'm an owner of this company, and we pay ourselves a salary, and then at the end of the year, if the year has gone well, we pay ourselves a bonus. So there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat.
Right. So when lawyers track their hours and they charge by the hour, is that counting all the hours that they're spending investigating the case and going through all the process you were talking about?
Well, I think so, and that's a question better for somebody else, but I think so. The joke in the law for hourly lawyers is they go and they keep track of every 6 minutes, because apparently all of the time management software counts things in 6-minute increments. And so if I pick up the phone and speak with somebody for 6 minutes, I'm going to document that and charge them for 6 minutes of work, which sounds terribly tedious to me, but I understand that that's how it's done.
Yeah, it's 1/10 of an hour.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess that makes sense. Cool. So you would say you don't really have much of a daily routine when it comes to this? Do you get to decide your schedule, or just work whenever things come up?
I mean, I do, and that's the other nice side about practicing the type of law that I do. We work really hard when we've got to work hard, and if there's no deadlines coming up or no court dates or whatever, we can go on vacation, you know?
Hmm.
So in a lot of ways, yeah, I dictate my own schedule, but that means also that when I'm not working, I'm not actively, you know, making money for my business. And so
Hmm.
there's a lot of flexibility, and I really like that. When I worked before as an employee lawyer for my old law firm, they had the same type of law practice, all personal injury, contingent work, but I was an employee, and I was expected to be there regular business hours. And still, even in that setting, there was some flexibility because, you know, I would work, you know, really long days for many, many weeks as we prepared for a big trial or something. And then I'd say, I'm out of here for 3 weeks, and they'd say, great.
Hmm.
So I'm not as acquainted with how it works in a, you know, an hourly billing type practice, but I would imagine that they have, you know, structures that you probably see in other type of professions, you know, standard time off and stuff.
Mhm.
I'm an owner of this business, and so my philosophy is I need to mind my business, and so I should be here, you know, so I try to be here at 9 every morning. I try to stay at least until most of the staff is ready to leave every day, and there's some flexibility there, but
Right.
yeah.
How many people do you have working with you here?
Well, 2 full-time lawyers, then we've got 2 full-time paralegals and 2 part-time legal assistants, and they're all awesome. They're
So
great.
what is the difference between all 3 of those then? What do all 3 of those do?
Well, it's a good question. So we try to structure it in a way so that the things that require a lawyer to do is what we focus on. The things that require a paralegal or their knowledge base, they do, and anything that they can push on to the legal assistants, they do. And so we try to balance it and use everybody's expertise as best we can.
So is it some sort of like hierarchy?
Well, in a way, only in that, like, this is the training that I have. My paralegal couldn't write a brief, but I can. And so we just found, I mean, when things are busy, all hands are on deck. You know, I'm not below making our copies or running to get the pizza or whatever. But it makes little sense for our company to spend my time doing that stuff if my time could be spent doing lawyer stuff that makes us more money. And so
Mhm.
simply a matter of being practical. And what I like is that our team is very unified, and there is a feeling of we can all jump in on doing whatever needs to be done. And but we try to keep it, you know, flowing so that nobody's overwhelmed, and that if something requires a paralegal or requires a lawyer, we are able to focus on that instead of focusing on things that someone else could do.
Hmm. Yeah, so what is the paralegal's job then?
Well, it depends on the firm. In our firm, my paralegal basically is, she's the brain of the operation. I mean, I bring in cases, I strategize and set forth like our plan for each case. This is what we need to do, this is what evidence we need to gather, these are our witnesses and whatever. I take the lead in keeping in contact with our clients and hearing their story and preparing them for their testimony and stuff. And everything else I move down to my paralegal with instructions that if you want to move anything to the legal assistant, you can. And she's awesome. She helps me with scheduling things. She helps me with gathering evidence and organizing the evidence. She helps a lot with coordinating with our expert witnesses and making sure that they've got stuff that they need and that they show up and that they get paid and all of that. So really anything that isn't requiring my mind as the lawyer, she takes the lead on, and she may delegate to others. But she's someone in whom I repose a lot of trust, and is a dear friend who I love also. Very competent and super duper. I hope she stays forever. She's
Yeah.
talked about law school. I would totally support her in doing something like that. But.
So you only have to go to law school to become a lawyer, not to become a paralegal or an assistant?
Right. There are paralegal schools. It's like I think LDS Business College has one. I think SLIC has a program. Quite frankly, in my experience, and other lawyers may have had a different experience, but in my experience, more important even than having some sort of paralegal credentials or a certificate is just the capacity to deal with stuff, the interest in learning new interesting things, willingness to manage some chaos with some humor, and reliability. So if someone wanted to work for me who did not have a paralegal certificate and we had a paralegal spot open, I would be very open to, interviewing and considering them, because in my experience, those attributes are much more important than having gone to paralegal school. So other people feel differently. Like, I know a lot of the larger firms in town, they require that. I just haven't seen it to be as valuable as some of those intangibles.
Right. Seems like more and more people are looking more for like personality and experience than for credentials in the long run. So would you say that being like a paralegal or an assistant would be a good way to get experience if you were trying to become a lawyer in the long run?
I think it could. I mean, the one nice thing that I really liked about law school and lawyering is that there was no real prerequisite. You know, I mean, I was a liberal arts major. I had classmates in law school who were like, you know, I had one was a professional violinist. Another was a designer of fighter jets. You know, I mean, we had people all over the map. And there was no like prerequisite coursework you had to do. You had to graduate college, you know, and you had to take the LSAT. And it didn't really matter what your prior training was. And so, you know, folks ask me that sometimes, you know, what do I need to do to get experience, either to get into law school or to prepare for law school? And I just tell them, just kind of live your life and work hard in school and get interesting experiences. But in terms of like, yeah, if you want to kind of figure out, is this for me? I mean, one of our assistants right now, our legal assistants, is in college and she's toying with the idea of law school, and she just wanted to kind of get a flavor for what it was like. And so that's why she applied, you know, to our firm, and she's been awesome. And I have no idea if she'll actually go. Maybe she won't. You know, but for her, just kind of seeing the day-to-day work, seeing what it's all about, is one thing she wanted to do.
Right. So what do you actually learn like in law school? What's that like?
Well, it's goodness. First off, they try to scare you. It's not as scary as they say. So it's not as scary as they say. But the first year they try to focus on some really basic skills like legal writing, you know, how to organize a legal brief, and how to kind of think like a lawyer. And what I mean by that is break down something into what is the rule of law. So we do a lot of reading case opinions from appellate courts. They'll issue an opinion on a case, and within that opinion they'll talk about the facts of the case, you know, whatever it is. This insurance company promised to their insured that they would do this, and then they didn't, and then somebody got hurt and this happened or whatever. But within the case, they'll also talk about what is the rule of law that we want to apply to all the future cases. And so in the first year, they teach you how to read a case and pull out the rule of law and analyze stuff. And then how to write, you know, based on that type of analysis. And they expose you to some of the fundamental areas of law, like constitutional law and contracts and torts and stuff like that. And then after that, like a lot of your classes there's some practical coursework, like you can take a clinic, what they call it, where you go out in the community and you do work for somebody, you know, maybe for, mostly it's like government or volunteer organizations. Like they have a street law clinic where folks can come in just sort of off the street and ask their questions about the law. They have, I worked for a time for the Disability Law Center, which is just what it sounds like, and they would advocate for folks. You know, I remember we did a lot with like nursing homes and stuff like that. And I worked for a judge for a short time, which was super cool. So you have those kind of practical courses you can take. And then you take other things like international law or, heaven forbid, like federal tax law or something horrible like that. And you just take a wide range of classes in different areas of law. So it's three years. The first year, everyone's like super focused and does all their reading and works really hard. And the second year, you're busy because maybe there's a couple of journals or like publications that a lot of folks participate in and write articles for and edit and stuff. Or they'll be on the mock trial, the moot court team, and you do that your second year. And then your third year, everyone's just sort of biding their time to get through. You know, the third year, everybody's chomping at the bit to get out. But I liked it. I had a great time in law school.
Yeah, I guess it doesn't seem like it's too intense like a lot of people might expect.
Yeah, I think they scare you. I think they scare you into thinking you're going to hate your life. And I mean, that just wasn't my experience. I went to the University of Utah, and I had a great experience. So if anybody watching this is worried about law school, call me. Because really, I think I loved meeting my classmates. I had a really diverse group of classmates. I really enjoyed them. We crawled over, I think, every rock in Utah my first year of law school, which is when they tell you you're going to slit your wrists, and it's just not true. You know, and I think a lot of law students get wrapped up in like the competitiveness of it all, like class rank and all of that, and And I regret that so many people did that. I didn't care, probably because I wasn't like super duper, but I had just a couple of classmates that were really into that and just were at the library all the time. And within a couple years after leaving law school, it just does not matter. So it's, my advice to folks going to law school is, do your best, but don't kill yourself, and find ways of enjoying it, because I'm telling you, it gets interesting. I mean, you learn lots of stuff and you meet interesting people, and
do because you enjoy it, not because you want to just try and make a lot of money off of it.
I think so. And that can be hard. Like if people are supporting a family or something, that can be hard. But yeah, I mean, the only advice I ever give to anybody in law school is like, relax. It's fine. I don't care if you're the bottom third of the class, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah,
I believe that.
That's interesting. I think lawyers are seen like lawyers, doctors, like the few hardest positions to get through school. So that's interesting that you say that it's like not too bad in a lot of ways.
Maybe other schools are different. I don't know. I had a great experience at the University of Utah.
Yeah, that's cool. So if people are saying like, oh, I got my law degree at Harvard or something, like how would that be different for the people who have like went to a prestigious law school or something?
That's a good question. I really don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I know a couple of people who went to those fancy pants places, and I really don't know how their experience was different. Maybe they had a leg up on getting some jobs right out of law school, I would think. I mean, I would think somebody from Harvard would have a leg up over someone from, like, the University of Utah and getting a job at maybe one of the huge law firms or something like that, because they're really hot on those type of credentials. But in terms of their educational experience, I don't know. In terms of how that affected them over sort of the lifetime of their career. I mean, the folks that I've known have, kind of been just like everybody else, interesting people who are doing good work, and, so I can't speak to that much. All I can say is, the lawyers that I've found that are the happiest are the folks who, haven't let their decisions be made for them in terms of what they do, and have kind of jumped out of that, kind of race, that walking in the ruts that have gone before them, and have said, look, listen, I think what would make me happy is to, have a small personal injury practice. And, I think I don't know if it's still this way, but one of the downsides I felt to the law school model was that I didn't feel that there was a lot of direction about what do you do when you get out of law school? What if there's no jobs? Because at the time I graduated, there weren't. I was lucky to find one. And I don't know that they prepare you for that. And the only thing people know is that there are big law firms that hire like a handful of lawyers, and so we're all competing for those same jobs, and it's just not true, And I think that's why a few people just broke their back trying to study too much and went overboard, because they're like, oh, I gotta get one of those because I've got 3 kids and I've gotta support them, and I get that pressure. That's very real. But the truth of the matter is there's lots of opportunities, and I wish law school had done a little bit better job of helping me appreciate that there are lots of things you can do, So I think a lot of lawyers too, once they start working for a firm and they have a salary and they're finally paying off that damn student debt and they're getting a little bit more comfortable and like, okay, I can manage this, they really are afraid to move away from that. And I was afraid to move away from that. I was in a very comfortable place, I was paid very well. Somebody else was handling all of the, law firm administration stuff, and that was fine, and I just found myself totally overworked, and I was working for somebody else rather than working for myself. And I had an opportunity to drop in my lap to break off and start my own firm. It was the best thing I ever did. And so I try to tell everyone that I can that if you can work for yourself, you should.
Yeah.
Because you'll be happier and you'll make more money and you'll be less, it's not so crazy making as working for somebody else when you have no control over decisions that they make and stuff. And everyone that I've known that has gone out on their own has been happy. So.
Yeah. So also something I've wondered is like, so let's say you've gotten a job as a lawyer, how do you move your way up? Like, is there anything above just a basic lawyer? Like, can you go upwards, and like, how are some lawyers making tons of money and others are like barely getting by?
Well, there's lots of There's lots of avenues. In the sort of law firm structure, most of the time, there are associates that are like employee lawyers, and then there are partners who are like law firm owner lawyers. And the general wisdom has been, once you make partner, then, you've sort of arrived, and that's when you'll start making a lot more money, because the idea is the associates are all working under you, and they're making a lot of money, and your partners are making a lot of money, and you share in all of that. And I think in theory that could work, and I think sometimes law firms get so big and their overhead gets so uncontrollable that it doesn't work, and partners finally arrive after many years of working as an employee associate to find that I'm really not making that much more money, and I have no less work, and I'm under more pressure, So, but that's only one way. I mean, others, some people really want to be a judge, and so there are lawyers who practice law for, 15, 20 years maybe, and then apply to be a judge.
Is it really hard to become a judge?
I don't know. I don't really know. I'm not sure. I'm sure in some ways it is, and and not everyone. I'm not really interested in that, but a lot of people are. So that's another route you can take. A lot of lawyers end up, starting with a firm and starting as an associate, maybe making partner, but then breaking off and either joining another firm or starting their own firm. So there's lots of ways to skin that cat. There are government lawyers, people who work for, like the Attorney General's office or something like that. And I don't know what their internal. I assume they've got some structure where you can advance, to some degree. So my brother was a military lawyer in the Marine Corps, and they just sort of followed the same rank structure that all of the officers did. So there's lots of different ways of doing it. In our firm, right now my business partner and I are the owners of our firm, and I have no ambitions to own another firm. I would like to grow our business and to bring on associates and bring them up to be our partners, and that's what my vision would be for our practice. But I'm pretty happy.
That's cool. So as far as like when you're dealing with a case, I've honestly never been to court for anything. So what is court like? Like, what do you have to do, and why do you have to go so many times for certain cases?
Well, that's a really good question. What is court like depends on what kind of case you're in court for. So in our practice, an injury and wrongful death plaintiff's practice, we aren't in court that often. Most of the time, we file a lawsuit, which means we electronically submit a paper to the court that says, we're suing this other side. And then the other side will file something saying, we acknowledge that you've sued us, let's get in it. And then we don't really go to court unless there is a dispute that arises. Both parties just sort of work together. We share information, we take witness statements and depositions, and so I rarely need to involve the court unless we have a dispute that we can't resolve ourselves. Like, I say to the other side, you are obligated to give me this piece of evidence under this rule, and the other side says, no, I don't think that rule requires that, we read it differently. And we just go to the judge and say, will you decide this dispute? And he says, yes, you've got to produce it, or no, you don't, or whatever, and then we go on. And the only other time we get involved is if we approach trial, which again could be a year and a half or something down the road. And we need a trial date, meaning, when I say trial, I mean like that's when we, for a solid 3 days or 2 weeks or however long it is, we have a jury sitting there, we present all of our evidence, and we ask the jury to return a verdict. So as we approach that, we might have to go to court a couple of times to get ready for that. But for what we do, we don't go a lot.
Oh, okay. So there is a difference between just going to court and then a trial? Like, there's a difference between those, okay. Yeah, so it always seems like a lot of lawsuits are like a big battle between two sides. Do you feel like you're battling other people in a lot of cases?
In a lot of times, yeah, a lot of times I do. And more often, I think what it is, at least in our type of cases, it's a matter of both sides getting all the information that they need to evaluate the case to try to get it resolved. So from where I'm sitting, let's say I'm representing somebody who is suing, I don't know, let's just say another driver. Let's say there was a car wreck, two private people in a car wreck, and then the other driver caused it and my client was injured. If we have to file a lawsuit, most of the time it just means I need to talk with that other driver to see what they remember about what happened. And so I'll take their deposition. And if the other driver says, yeah, I ran the red light, then, that's basically all I need from them. But their attorney is going to need to know information about my client. What are their medical expenses? What are their injuries? Are they going to need more care in the future? How has this affected their life? Have they had to miss work? Have they had to miss all their kids' birthday parties? Have they, all of those kinds of things. And so most of what we do is engaged in just exchange of information. We call it discovery. And once both sides have everything, and sometimes we have to, if we disagree about who caused the crash, for example, I might have to hire an engineer to do a reconstruction of the accident based on photos and damage to the vehicles and stuff. The other side may hire somebody else, and they may disagree about their opinions. And then we may have to decide, all right, well, what are the chances of me winning at trial with my expert over his expert and that kind of thing? Often what happens in our cases is after we've all collected information, we sit down and try to settle the case in a mediation with a mediator helping the parties talk. We do a lot of that.
Well, that's cool. So I guess we could say, to finish, what is it that you love about this job, and who would you recommend should go for this job, and how can they learn more about it?
Well, I can only speak to the kind of law that I practice, which is personal injury. Plaintiff's side, personal injury, meaning the person who's been injured is suing somebody else. I represent the person who's been injured. And quite candidly, I wouldn't want to practice any other type of law. I think it's awesome. And the reason I love it is because I get to be in the homes of my clients who are real people who are dealing with the hardest things of their lives. And I get to hear their stories, and I get to see them overcome these really hard things. And to me, the human component is what I love and what's so compelling. It is what motivates me, when I get into a case. I spoke with a client yesterday who's been dealing with these horrible, debilitating migraine headaches because he's got a cerebral spinal fluid leak from his crash. So spinal fluid is leaking from his spine and causing these horrible, debilitating migraines, and he can't work, and he's just at home huddled in the ball all day long. And he called me yesterday and said, Jessica, every time I talk to you, I feel better. Thank you for listening to me. And that to me makes everything worth it, the ability that I have to be with these people and to hold their hand and navigate through something they probably couldn't do on their own. So that's what I love about it. So I'd say for anybody who wants to get into the law, when I graduated law school, I did not think, I want to be a personal injury lawyer. I want my face on a billboard on the freeway. None of that. I was not interested. My brother had practiced this type of law and told me it was awesome, so I gave it a try, and I've loved it. And so I would hope that more folks who are interested in going into the law will consider it, because I think it's just, you're happier. You make great money. You'll be fine. You'll be happier, and you can meet some of the best people and have a good human experience. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, well, we could probably talk about law for days, but is there any way that you would suggest someone could just learn more about it if they're just looking into trying to get into it?
Well, they could call me if they want. I mean, anybody's welcome to call me if they want to talk about it. What you might really do too is, I'll bet that if you called up the University of Utah Law School admissions office and just said, I just want to talk with somebody about what law school is like, I bet they would. Yeah, so that's something else you could do. But I would just say talk to people, talk to lawyers, and I guarantee they'd be happy to talk with you about it and answer your questions. I would. That's what I'd recommend.
That's interesting. So you don't have a lot of people that come around that are just asking for advice, that kind of thing?
We have some. I mean, young people in my life will often just ask about it generally. What is it like to be a lawyer? Is it hard? Do you like it? I've had a couple of clients who have said, I'm thinking about law school now that we've gone through this. And I take that as a good sign.
Yeah. And then sometimes people want to come into your office and video an interview with you for an hour.
Sometimes, not very often. Yeah.
Well, that was pretty interesting. Hopefully, if you're looking into doing law school or becoming a lawyer or something like that, that you got to learn a lot about that. But that is all for this video. So, I'll talk to you later.